At 75, Clifton Webb faced a truth he had choreographed for decades. He lived with his mother, Mabel, not only out of devotion, but to shelter secret romances the industry could never forgive. The arrangement looked quaint in press photos. It was armor. Studio publicists called it refined bachelorhood. Whisper networks called it something else. A single rumor could erase his contracts, his cultured image, his elegant voice on every marquee. So he smiled, poured tea, and turned scandal into manners. Behind heavy curtains, he measured every phone call, every visit, every lingering glance. How did a boy from the Midwest learn such perfect control? And why did control become his only safe home? To answer, we go back to the start. He was born Webb Parmalee Hollenbeck in 1889, Indianapolis, a railroad town with muddy streets and bright shop windows. His father, Jacob, managed sales. His mother, Mabel, kept a fierce, glittering eye on possibility. The marriage faltered early. Mother and son formed a unit that felt like destiny. She called him Sonny. He called her the whole world. They left the Midwest before he finished growing. New York offered better mirrors and larger rooms. The city roared with streetcars and gramophones. Immigrants reshaped corners with bakeries, theaters, and borrowed languages. On 8th Avenue, he watched dancers slide like silk and smoke. He studied steps obsessively. Ballet for the spine, ballroom for the frame, song for the soul. Mabel encouraged everything. She carried a leather notebook for schedules and rent. She also carried his confidence. By the 19-teens, he was working the smallest stages. Cafes where the pianist wore fingerless gloves in winter. Roof gardens where champagne sweated in pails. He learned how to place his body in light, how to turn a head at the exact moment a laugh should land. He mastered timing before fame knew his name. Style became his armor. Wit became his currency. People remembered the line of his jaw, the angle of his cuff, the way he could pivot without spilling a drop. The world changed around him like scenery pulling on ropes. War in Europe, jazz in Harlem. Hemlines rose and morals bent, then snapped again. The 1920s taught him how to glitter. The early 30s taught him how to hide. Nightlife in New York held coded rooms and careful smiles. The so-called pansy craze drew crowds to flamboyant performers. Then the mood shifted. Police raids, moral leagues, sermons against indecency. A man could be praised for poise on stage and punished for softness off stage. He learned discretion as a second language. Mabel steered their household with theatrical discipline. She booked lessons, negotiated wages, and kept the gossip tidy. She also believed in the myth of America. Work hard, aim high, move faster than judgment. She rented tidy apartments with good drapes and better locks. She rehearsed him before auditions and coached his interviews. They made a life built on polish, stamina, and vigilance. By the late 30s, he had a name in certain circles. Broadway impresarios recognized the precision. Society patrons recognized the charm. Biographers note he visited Paris and London for engagements, absorbing couture and accent. But the real stage waiting for him stood 3,000 miles away. Cameras would sharpen everything he had practiced in shadows. Hollywood was calling, and Mabel was already packing trunks. Broadway shaped his profile before celluloid claimed it. He learned control under hot lights and restless audiences. Reviews taught him speed and precision. Composers valued his diction and sting. He made entrances that felt like verdicts. Applause followed the cut of his suit and the arrow of his gaze. He became the man who could freeze a room with one raised eyebrow. Musicals made him quick with patter. Comedy taught him how to slice. He traded in elegance. He traded in timing. Critics called him urbane. Patrons called him devastating. Reportedly, he worked with songwriters who understood his bite and polish. His dancing never shouted. It whispered authority. That quiet was gold. It meant the audience was stunned and leaning closer. The country shifted again. Film absorbed theater talent like a tide. He stayed patient while younger men chased screens. He knew camera work demanded microscopic truth. The lens would adore restraint. It would punish bluff. That suited him. He collected his instincts and waited for the role that fit like a glove. In 1944 it arrived. Laura, a stylish murder mystery at 20th Century Fox. The director needed a man who spoke like cologne and carried knives in his compliments. He auditioned and hit the tone instantly. Waldo Lydecker was born with his pen sharpened and his heart locked. The studio worried at first. They called him too theatrical, too arch. Then dailies came back. The doubts evaporated. On screen, every syllable floated and then landed with force. He became the film's secret engine. The picture opened to acclaim. His performance drew raves and an Academy Award nomination for supporting actor. He walked red carpets beside fresh starlets and veteran legends. He looked amused by the attention. He let the spotlight glide over him like a silk scarf. He understood the new rules. Screen charisma was not a shout. It was a hum. Fox signed him and set to work. The Razor's Edge followed. Another nomination. Another confirmation that his cool could burn. Then came a different challenge. Comedy without music. A barbed domestic farce called Sitting Pretty. He played a mysterious houseguest named Mr. Belvedere, with imperial calm and surgical wit. Audiences laughed until they ached. Critics conceded he was a new kind of leading man. Middle-aged, immaculate, deadly funny. Sequels cemented the phenomenon. He could open films with a glance and a dry remark. Publicists painted him as the definitive bachelor. They polished the story of a man devoted to his mother, his art, and perfect shirts. Magazine spreads showed tea trays, orchids, and city views. Interviewers got sparkle and zero confession. He gave them the illusion of intimacy. He gave them design. Off camera, the system added pressure. Morality clauses hovered over every contract. Tabloids hunted difference. He understood the cost of a misplaced word. Fame had arrived, and with it, the price of being seen. Fame handed him rooms where secrets felt luxurious. He learned the maps quickly. Private salons in Beverly Hills, Sunday gatherings where George Cukor hosted careful circles, soft lamps, French records, waiters with white gloves. Guests traded lines from plays and news from sets. Men took each other's measure in the reflection of crystal. Nothing explicit, everything understood. He fit the choreography. He stood near the piano and let interest approach. Biographers note he favored discretion over conquest. He loved talk. He loved talent. He gravitated to men who understood timing and taste. A choreographer from New York, visiting for a film, reportedly met him after a rehearsal. Their first conversation lasted until dawn. They walked sunset, while sprinklers hissed on perfect lawns. He admired the other man's hands, calloused from work. The dancer admired Clifton's voice when it lowered to a whisper. They exchanged numbers like diplomats. Meetings were scheduled between fittings and call times. Hotels with side entrances, restaurants with booths that swallowed light. He traveled with care. Studio tours made a practical excuse for departures. So did premieres in Chicago or London. Steamship cabins granted privacy that trains could not. He wrote postcards to Mabel about weather and menus. He wrote letters to friends about art and tempo. The romantic notes lived between lines. Codes became a language. He never risked names. He never risked dates. Parties remained the safest theater. A producer's terrace in the hills. A costume designer's bungalow in West Hollywood. He arrived on time, never drunk, always alert. He flirted with sharpness rather than touch. A perfect line. A perfect smile. Then a private drive home. Occasionally, a companion joined the route, seated in shadow. They spoke about music and dogs and boats. The silence after each laugh felt like a hand being held. Public images required counterweight. The studio arranged teas with actresses, then planted small items in magazines. He complied without complaint. He posed for photographs with the grace of a man fencing air. The captions praised elegance and discipline. Interviewers asked about romance. He spoke about work and orchids. He praised his mother's cooking and good manners. He let reporters fill the vacuum with assumptions. The contracts were blunt. Morality clauses guarded the studio's investments. Any scandal could end everything. He understood the rules better than most. He accepted their chill and built a warmer interior life. Contemporaries recalled a handsome tenor he favored for a season. Another friend remembered a screenwriter with a shy smile and brutal wit. None of the names ever reached the papers. None of the faces ever appeared beside him at premieres. This was safety and sorrow braided together. The 1950s sharpened the danger. Congressional hearings linked difference to disloyalty. Tabloids sniffed for deviance and paid well for rumor. Confidential magazine made baiting a sport. One columnist reportedly tried to corner him with a leading question at a restaurant. He parried with humor so elegant, the table applauded. Then he left early, claiming an early call. The night air felt like thin glass. He drove home, checked the locks, and poured tea for Mabel. They spoke about music. They did not speak about the trap waiting if a single door opened. The double life had limits. He could not protect everyone he cared for. A partner might be braver. A partner might be reckless. Reportedly, one was followed by a private detective hired by a jealous boss. Another received a threatening note after leaving a party. He urged caution. He arranged distance. Each precaution cut love into safer, smaller pieces. The risk was rising. The next whisper could become print. The first blow arrived as a question that would not end. Why does he live with his mother? The phrasing varied across columns. The insinuation stayed the same. A gossip item praised his home as a shrine to good taste. It also hinted at secrets behind the drapes. He answered with charm. Charm did not erase ink. Confidential magazine prowled. So did rivals with sharper teeth. The nation chased purity like a sport. Senators held hearings. Studios tightened morality clauses and rehearsed denials. Lawyers drafted addendums that read like traps. One clause allowed termination for conduct bringing ridicule. Who defined ridicule? The studio, of course. He kept working, but pressure bled through. In meetings, executives tested his public image. Could he carry another romantic lead, or should he be shifted toward eccentrics and dignified villains? Reportedly, one project cooled after a columnist promised revelations. Another stalled when an advertiser begged for a safer face. Too arch, a memo read. Too knowing, another added. The words struck harder than insults. They sounded like exile. Photographers baited him at restaurants. A flash popped as a man he cared for stepped back a second too slowly. The image never ran, but someone saw. Someone always saw. He learned new routes through town. He learned which parking lots had 2 exits. He learned how fear edits even simple pleasures. Mabel stood guard. She answered the phone. She arranged the seating at dinners. She corrected the record with iron patience. But even she could not slow time. Television upended the business. Younger idols arrived with unstudied heat. Method actors swallowed rooms. He adapted with discipline. He delivered immaculate work in dramas and comedies. Yet the atmosphere changed. The public wanted rough edges. He offered polished cut glass. A beautiful strength. A dangerous tell. The worst evening began at a charity gala. A columnist with a smile like a closed blade approached. He asked about matrimony. He asked about heirs. He asked why a man of culture avoids the normal path. The circle tightened. Laughter grew brittle. Clifton answered with lines about work and travel. The columnist leaned closer. He whispered a name. Almost right. Clifton set down his glass and left before dessert. At home, the rooms felt cold. Mabel brought tea in silence. He stared at the carpet and counted breaths. He knew how quickly whispers ignite. Then came the loss he could not deflect. His mother's health failed at decade's end. The house darkened. The phone fell quiet. When she died, the walls lost their voice. He stood in the doorway of her room and felt the machinery stop. Without Mabel, the fortress was gone. The crisis became a single, echoing truth. He had built his life to be admired and unseen. Now the person who understood the cost had left the stage. Grief did what the studios never could. It slowed him. Without Mabel's brisk voice, mornings felt airless. He still dressed precisely. He still aligned cufflinks before breakfast. But the house no longer hummed. Friends visited with flowers and careful jokes. He smiled, thanked them, then watched the door close. Work remained a refuge, so did ritual. He adjusted to a new Hollywood with composure. The old studio boundaries were fraying. Method actors prowled. Youth culture surged. He chose projects that honored timing over noise. Directors still sought his intelligence. He could tilt a scene with 3 words and an eyebrow. On set, he kept standards high. He treated crew members with courtly respect. He corrected himself first. He expected precision from others, but never raised his voice. Television asked for appearances. He obliged selectively. He liked live audiences and clean cues. He liked the ritual of rehearsal halls, the smell of dust and paint. He also liked leaving before the parties. Friends recalled small suppers at his house, with chamber music and stories told in low voices. He poured tea in china that once belonged to his mother. The ritual steadied him. Memory could be both anchor and tide. Health reminders arrived like stage knocks. Reportedly, there were hospital stays and stern warnings. He listened, promised moderation, then returned to his pace. He kept walking the neighborhood in the late afternoon, cane tapping rhythm on warm sidewalks. Neighbors noticed his hat, his immaculate shoes, his precise nod. He remained a figure out of a more composed century, living inside a faster one. The culture around him began to shift. Whispered lives met new language during the decade. Activists found microphones. Newspapers tested different tones. He read carefully and said little. He had survived by perfecting silence. Yet he noticed younger men speaking with a bravery his generation rarely risked. The sight brought him mixed feeling. Pride, envy, relief. Time, it seemed, was inching somewhere kinder. He made a kind of chosen family in these years. A trusted assistant who kept the calendar and the flowers sharp. A pianist who came on Sundays. 2 younger actors who visited for supper and advice about dialogue and posture. He offered mentorship freely, while keeping his private corners intact. He never gossiped about others. He never betrayed confidences. Dignity was not an act. It was his ethic. Near the end, he took more pleasure in small exactness. A perfect knot in a tie. A book arranged just so. A lamp turned to the right temperature of gold. He understood that control could soothe without imprisoning. He also understood its limits. Life had taught him the cost of visibility. It had also taught him the cost of vanishing. The balance, he decided, was to be fully present in the moments one could trust, and graciously distant where one could not. That conclusion was not resignation. It was craft applied to living. He built a sanctuary out of polish and poise, and survived inside it. The price was silence. The reward was work that still gleams across the screen. Watch Laura again, and listen to the temperature drop when he speaks. Watch Sitting Pretty, and measure the precision of each pause. Under the brittle sparkle, there is a man measuring risk, breath by breath. His story is not only about fear, it is also about mastery. He learned to carve space in a hostile room and stand there with grace. He protected love by refusing spectacle. He honored his craft by refusing laziness. That discipline saved his career. It also cost him easy tenderness. The double life gave him safety and winter in the same house. Today, audiences recognize the code he lived within. We hear what could not be said. We see what could not be shown. And we recognize courage that kept its voice low. If the industry had allowed honesty, how many scenes might have moved differently? How many lives might have unfolded with less ache? If this story moved you, share your thoughts below. Which moment surprised you most? What film of his means the most to you? Subscribe for more hidden histories of Hollywood, and help us honor those who worked under impossible rules with impossible elegance.